Do you guys remember the movie Jennifer's Body? It came out in 2009 and starred Megan Fox, who played a high schooler who became possessed after a rock band tried to sacrifice her to Satan. Now, would you believe it if I told you that the movie actually was inspired by a real-life story? Well, here is the real-life murder behind Jennifer's Body. Let's get into it. Elise Marie Paller was born on April 24th, 1980 in Templeton, California, to Lisanne and David Paller. She was the oldest of 4 kids and was said to be very close to her family. Elise and her family moved to Arroyo Grande, California, in a house that her dad actually built. For some reason, Elise's mom decided to homeschool her for 6th and 7th grade, but then she joined middle school in 8th grade before later going to Arroyo Grande High School. Elise was a good student who got good grades and played soccer and tennis. She was also very active in the church choir and the local theater, as she aspired to become an actress when she got older. Everyone who knew Elise described her as outgoing, free-spirited, and adventurous. She was always one of those people who were always reaching out and talking to everyone, and because of this, she had many friends, and everyone seemed to like her. In her group of friends, Elise was sort of the wild one, and she would often be sneaking out from home and then come back with some interesting stories to tell. Elise was also experimenting with alcohol and narcotics, which soon started to get out of hand. She was suspended from school for 5 days after she was caught engaging in underage drinking. When her parents learned about this, they decided to put her in a rehab center called Mariposa Recovery Center, hoping that she would get clean and get her life back on track. But sadly, this is where her nightmare began. While Elise was in the recovery center, she happened to meet a boy called Jacob Delaschmatt. He is actually in the same school as Elise, though they didn't run in the same circles, so they never really interacted. Jacob and his friends, Joseph Fiorella and Royce Casey, had a bad rep in town and were known as social misfits. They were into some really dark stuff and were always getting in trouble in school. The 3 had also formed a heavy metal band called Hatred, which was heavily inspired by the band Slayer. Slayer is a conversion yet popular death metal band whose music revolves around some really scary stuff like murder, Satan, and human sacrifice. In fact, the meaning behind the name is Satan laughs as you eternally rot. So these 3 teenagers were totally obsessed with Slayer's music and would spend hours listening to it and reading materials about satanic rituals. When Elise met Jacob at the recovery center, they sort of developed a friendship, and it was through that she came to meet the 2 other boys. Although they were not really that close, she would hang out with the boys once in a while just to be nice, though her friends kept warning her about it. And it was at this time that the boys started developing a dangerous obsession with her. Their band Hatred was not doing so well, and they were looking for ways to make it a success. And during one of their discussions, they came up with a really sick and twisted plan. Why not offer a sacrifice to Satan so he could make the band successful? All 3 thought that it was a great idea. With the dark powers of the devil, they would get otherworldly abilities to play their music better and get a record deal. Crazy, right? But they actually thought that would work. They only needed someone to sacrifice, and they had just the right person in mind, Elise Paller. In their twisted, sick little minds, they thought that Elise would make the perfect sacrifice since she was blonde, blue-eyed, and a virgin. The devil would be so pleased with the sacrifice that he would give them everything they wanted. So they decided to come up with a plan of how to do it. By this time, Elise had started to notice the weird and creepy way that the boys were behaving towards her. She would often catch them staring at her, and one time saw them across the street from her house. She started getting really uncomfortable about this and even told her friends about it. Her friends warned her against hanging out with the boys, saying they just seemed creepy and were not good people. But Elise didn't want to be mean, so despite her fears, she continued to talk to the creepy trio and hang out with them. One day, as Elise was walking home from school, she saw Jacob and his friends waving at her to come over. As she got closer, the boys told her that someone had slipped down a ravine and that they needed help. But when Elise went to check, one of the boys pushed her, and she lost her balance and rolled down the steep ravine. When she was down there, another boy came down and walked up behind her with a knife. Luckily, at that moment, Elise's mom appeared and the boys ran away. That was a pretty scary incident for Elise, who didn't know what to think afterward. Was this just a bad joke, or were they actually trying to hurt her? But why would they do that? She's never done anything bad to them. Nothing about the incident made sense to to Elise, so she decided to brush it off as a bad prank. She also asked her parents not to take it seriously, saying the boys were just playing around. Then, on July 22nd, 1995, Elise received a call from Jacob, inviting her to come hang out with them. Although Elise was still uncomfortable about the previous incident, Jacob was able to convince her to go. So that night, instead of going to bed, Elise snuck out to meet the boys. But that was a big mistake. They went to a wooded area behind Elise's house where they started to smoke some pot. When Elise started to get high and relaxed, Jacob walked up behind her and wrapped his belt around her neck. Then Royce held her hands down so that she wouldn't struggle as Jacob plunged a hunting knife straight into her neck. The three boys each took turns stabbing her a total of 12 times as Elise prayed to God and cried for her mom to help her. When they saw that she did not die from the stab wounds, these monsters then stomped on her neck to finish her off faster. Can you imagine the kind of pain she must have gone through? She died slowly from the loss of blood, and yet things were not over yet. When she was dead, these disgusting monsters then took turns doing some despicable things to her lifeless body. The next morning, when Elise's parents noticed that she was not at home, they went to the police to report her missing. But the police thought that she was just a runaway and did nothing about it. Meanwhile, the boys kept bragging to their friends about what they had done to Elise, though no one took them seriously. As weeks turned into months, her family grew more worried. There's no way Elise would stay so long without contacting her family. They knew something bad had happened to their daughter, and the police were not helping. Elise's mom remembers the incident with Elise and the boys, and she told the police, hoping at least it would push them to act. But still, the cops did nothing. They just reported that someone had seen Elise in some other town with an older guy, but did not even bother to follow up on this claim. So for almost 9 months, Elise's lifeless body lay abandoned in the woods near her house as the boys went on with their lives as normal. That's really sad, guys. But even sadder is that she would have stayed there longer had one of the boys not developed a conscience. Royce had turned into a Christian and was now beginning to feel guilty about what they had done. He had also fallen out with his friends and was very afraid that they might come for him. So before that happened, he decided to go to the cops and confess everything. He told investigators everything that happened and even took them to where they had hidden Elise's remains. Elise's family was horrified by this information. Her devastated mom said that the worst thing was thinking about the torture that her daughter must have endured. Something is wrenched from you, a piece of your heart. That's what it feels like. The pain, it's so great. It's as great as any physical pain, anything you can imagine. On March 14th, 1996, the other boys were arrested and brought in for questioning. They both denied practicing Satanism, but admitted that they'd all played a part in Elise's death. They claimed that Slayer's music inspired them to commit the murder. Joseph, in particular, said, and I quote, "It gets inside your head. It's almost embarrassing that I was so influenced by the music. It started to influence the way I looked at things." The three of them were charged with murder, and despite being under 18 when they committed the crime, they were all tried separately as adults. They all pleaded no contest and received the sentence of 25 to life in prison. And just this year, Royce, who has been serving time